The CEO had always believed he understood his company. From his office on the top floor, he read reports, looked at numbers, and listened to presentations about sales, customer service, and employee satisfaction. He thought he knew what life was like for the people who worked in the stores. But deep inside, he carried a quiet doubt. Reports and meetings gave him facts, but they did not give him feelings. They did not let him see the struggle of a single employee, the stress of working a long shift, or the small acts of kindness that never made it into charts or spreadsheets. That was why he agreed to join an undercover program. It was not an easy decision. A man who spent years in boardrooms and conference halls was about to trade his tailored suit for a simple polo shirt with the company logo, a name tag that read trainee, and an apron that smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning solution. His assistants had tried to prepare him. They told him what tasks he might do: stocking shelves, bagging groceries, cleaning spills, and standing behind a register. They reminded him that he could not reveal his real identity. To the employees, he had to be just another trainee, someone new, awkward, maybe even a little clumsy. On his first day, he parked far from the front entrance of the store. Normally, he had a reserved spot with his name painted in bold letters. Today, he walked across the large parking lot like every other employee. The air smelled of gasoline from nearby cars and freshly baked bread drifting from inside the store. He felt both nervous and excited. His heart raced in a way it hadn't in years, not even before big business meetings. When he stepped inside, the store manager greeted him quickly. She did not know he was her boss. To her, he was just another new hire. She handed him a uniform and showed him the break room where employees kept their bags. The room was small, with a long table, mismatched chairs, a microwave that hummed loudly, and a refrigerator covered in magnets and sticky notes. He noticed one note that read, "Please don't take food that isn't yours." It was a small reminder of the reality of people working paycheck to paycheck. His first assignment was simple: stocking shelves. He followed another young employee who explained how to arrange boxes so the labels faced forward. The CEO bent down, lifted cartons, and placed cans in neat rows. His back ached after just half an hour. He realized that for many of his workers, this was an 8-hour shift, 5 or 6 days a week. As the morning passed, he met several employees. One was a high school student saving money for college. Another was a retired man who worked part-time for extra income. Then there were single parents who rushed to pick up children after their shifts. They all had stories, but none of them complained. They laughed with each other, helped customers with patience, and kept working even when the tasks felt endless. The CEO was struck by how invisible their effort often was. From headquarters, he only heard about sales numbers, not about the cashier who cheered up a tired mother or the stocker who carefully cleaned up a broken jar so no customer would slip. These were small acts of dedication, unseen but valuable. Later that day, he was assigned to bag groceries at the checkout line. He stood beside a cashier, carefully placing bread on top of canned goods, double bagging when something seemed too heavy. The cashier worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced speed. She greeted every customer with the same warm smile, even when some barely looked at her. The CEO admired her energy. She didn't know who he really was, and that allowed him to see her true self without any filter. The work was harder than he imagined. Standing for hours made his legs stiff. His palms grew sore from lifting bags again and again. By lunchtime, he was already exhausted. He looked forward to sitting down, drinking water, and eating a sandwich he had packed that morning. But before heading to the break room, he noticed the cashier he had been working with. She did not go to eat. Instead, she slipped away quietly, holding a small bag close to her chest. Curiosity tugged at him, but he did not follow. Not yet. He told himself he was here to observe, not to interfere. Still, The image of her leaving without food stayed in his mind. Why wouldn't she eat after such a long shift? As the day ended, he reflected on everything he had seen. For years, he had heard the phrase frontline workers, but those words now felt too cold, too distant. These were real people, each with their own lives, their own struggles, their own dreams. They were not just employees on a chart. They were the living, breathing heart of his company. That night, he lay in bed, more tired than he had been in years. His muscles ached, but his mind was alive. He thought about the break room with its sticky notes, the shelves that needed restocking, the smiles employees gave to strangers who barely noticed them. He thought about the cashier who skipped her lunch. Something about her lingered in his thoughts, as if her quiet action carried a story he did not yet know. The next morning, he returned to the store with fresh eyes. He no longer felt like a CEO in disguise, he felt like part of the team. Employees teased him gently when he stacked cans in the wrong order. They showed him tricks to carry heavier loads without hurting his back. They spoke to him about customers, about schedules, about long commutes. He listened closely, storing every word like a secret treasure. In those simple hours, he discovered more about his company than he had in years of meetings. He learned that employees cared deeply about customers, even when customers were rude. He learned that managers stretched budgets to make schedules fair, even when it seemed impossible. He learned that behind every uniform was a story worth hearing. And yet, his thoughts always returned to that cashier. Who was she feeding instead of eating? What sacrifice was she making that no one else noticed? He did not know it yet, but her quiet act of skipping lunch was about to change not just her life, but the entire company. The second day of his undercover journey began just like the first. He walked through the same wide parking lot, feeling the cool morning breeze brush against his face. The sun was rising over the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Employees hurried in, some carrying coffee cups, others with tired faces that showed they had just woken up. To them, this was another ordinary workday. To him, it was a chance to learn more about the people who made his company come alive. He adjusted the plain polo shirt and apron he wore, reminding himself once again that he was not the CEO today. He was simply the trainee. The manager greeted him warmly and handed him a small list of tasks for the day. Stocking shelves, assisting at the register, helping customers find items. Simple work, but work that mattered more than he had ever realized before. As the morning went on, he found himself once again working alongside the same cashier he had noticed the day before. She smiled at customers and greeted each one with the same cheerful energy. Her voice was soft but kind, and she always found something pleasant to say, even to those who barely looked at her. He couldn't help but admire her. While some employees carried tired expressions or sighed when lines grew long, she remained patient. She scanned items quickly, bagged groceries neatly, and even cracked gentle jokes to make people smile. She seemed to pour her heart into a job that many might see as ordinary. But what truly caught his attention was what happened when the clock struck lunchtime. Once again, just as the shift slowed down a little, she quietly stepped away. Others went to the break room, opening their lunch boxes or heating up leftovers. The air filled with the smell of pasta, sandwiches, and microwaved meals. But she was missing. The CEO, still in disguise, noticed this and felt the same tug of curiosity he had felt yesterday. He excused himself and followed at a careful distance, not wanting to intrude but needing to understand. She walked toward a small side door near the back of the store. Outside, a parked car sat in the shade. She opened the back door of the car, and that was when he saw it, a baby seat. Inside was a small child, barely more than a year old, waiting patiently. The young mother, his cashier, reached into her bag and pulled out a container of baby formula. She mixed it with water from a bottle she carried, shaking it gently until it blended. Then, with tender hands, she began feeding her baby. The CEO stood frozen, watching quietly from a respectful distance. The sight moved him more than he could have imagined. While other employees were eating to regain their strength, she was giving up her own meal to make sure her baby was fed. He noticed that she didn't bring any food for herself. Her entire break was devoted to her child. The baby, hungry but calm, drank eagerly from the bottle. The young mother smiled down at her child, whispering words of comfort that only a mother could say. Her face lit up in a way that was different from the polite smile she gave customers. This was a smile of pure love, the kind that came from deep inside. The CEO felt his throat tighten. In all his years leading the company, he had read reports about employee satisfaction, about wages and schedules. But no report had ever told him this story, a mother choosing to skip meals just to make sure her baby had enough to eat. This was not just a statistic. This was real life. As she finished feeding the baby, she gently tucked the child back into the seat and kissed their forehead. She whispered something like, "Mommy loves you. Be good, okay?" Then she closed the door softly and walked back into the store. The CEO returned inside too, still pretending to be just another trainee, but his mind was racing. He wanted to ask her why she didn't eat. He wanted to understand how she managed to work long shifts while caring for a child. But he also knew he had to be careful. If he asked too much, she might grow suspicious or uncomfortable. Later, when he got the chance, he struck up a casual conversation with her while they bagged groceries together. He asked simple questions, how long she had worked there, whether she liked the job, how she managed her schedule. She answered politely, always with that same gentle smile. But when he asked about lunch, she hesitated. "I usually don't eat much during my shift," she admitted softly, glancing down. "I just use the time to check on my baby." Her voice was steady, but he could sense the quiet sacrifice hidden between her words. She didn't say she was hungry, but he could tell. She didn't complain, but her story was written in her actions. She was putting her child's needs above her own, day after day. The CEO felt a mixture of emotions: admiration for her strength, sadness for her struggle, and guilt for not realizing sooner how difficult life was for some of his employees. From his office, it was easy to believe that wages were fair, that benefits were enough. But seeing her skip meals for her baby told a different story. The rest of the day passed, but his thoughts never left her. Even as he stocked more shelves, wiped counters, and learned how to scan items at the register, he kept thinking about the young mother. Her quiet sacrifice was invisible to customers and managers, but now it was deeply visible to him. That evening, as he left the store, he noticed her once more in the parking lot. She held her baby in one arm while carrying a bag of groceries in the other. The child rested peacefully against her shoulder, and despite her tired posture, she walked with determination. The CEO stood at a distance, watching, humbled by the strength of someone who carried so much responsibility yet asked for nothing in return. He got into his car but didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he sat in silence, thinking. Numbers and reports suddenly seemed empty compared to the reality he had just witnessed. This was not just about profits or sales. This was about people, real people with families, struggles, and sacrifices that no one in the boardroom ever talked about. The image of the mother feeding her baby instead of herself stayed with him all night. It was more powerful than any chart or statistic. It was a lesson, and he knew it was only the beginning of what he was meant to discover. The next day, the Undercover CEO walked into the store with a heavy heart. He had barely slept the night before, his mind replaying the moment he had seen the cashier feeding her baby instead of eating lunch herself. He kept asking himself why. Why would someone choose to go hungry when food was just steps away in the break room? What struggles could be so great that a mother had no choice but to sacrifice her own needs every single day? He reminded himself that part of his mission was to understand the people who worked for him. Not just to see their tasks or their daily routines, but to see their lives, their challenges, and the choices they were forced to make. And now, standing behind the counter once again, he knew he had to learn more about her. That afternoon, he found himself paired with the same cashier again. The store was busy, with customers rushing in after work, carts filled with bread, milk, fruits, and dinner ingredients. The lines grew long, and the cashier kept her pace steady, scanning item after item, never losing her composure. Her smile remained gentle, even when customers seemed impatient. She greeted children warmly, complimented elderly customers on their choices, and handled every situation with quiet grace. The CEO admired her professionalism, but he couldn't ignore the tiredness in her eyes. Between smiles, there were small moments when she looked worn down, almost fragile, though she quickly hid it behind her cheerful voice. When the rush slowed down, he finally had the chance to speak with her again. He asked about her day, her routine, and her family. She hesitated at first, perhaps unsure whether she should share personal details with the trainee. But something about his listening eyes made her open up, little by little. She told him she was a single mother. Life had not been easy since her baby was born. The father was no longer in the picture, and all the responsibility fell on her shoulders. Her paycheck from the store covered rent and child care, but it was never enough for everything. Formula, diapers, medical bills, they consumed most of what she earned. "I don't mind working hard," she said softly, arranging receipts as she spoke. "But sometimes it feels like no matter how much I work, it's never enough." The CEO felt his chest tighten. She wasn't complaining. She was simply telling the truth. Her words carried the weight of quiet struggle, the kind most people kept hidden. He gently asked why she didn't eat during breaks. For a moment, her eyes glistened as if she wasn't sure whether to answer. Then she looked down and said, I can't always afford both. My baby comes first." Her voice was calm, but those few words struck him harder than anything he had heard in a boardroom. She wasn't skipping meals because she wanted to, or because she was dieting, or because she forgot. She was making a choice, a painful, everyday choice, to give what little she had to her child. The CEO swallowed hard, trying to stay in his role as a trainee. He wanted to tell her who he was, to promise her that she would never have to make that choice again. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to see more, to learn more, before he revealed his true identity. The rest of the shift, he couldn't stop thinking about her words. He watched her continue working, cheerful and polite, even though he now knew the hardship behind her smile. Customers had no idea what sacrifices she made once she stepped away from the register. To them, she was just another cashier, scanning their groceries. To him, she was a living reminder of why he had gone undercover in the first place. After the store closed, he walked to his car slowly, deep in thought. He remembered the meetings back at headquarters where executives debated whether wages should be raised $1 or $2. They had looked at charts, compared numbers, and spoken in calm voices. But sitting in those meetings, no one had ever imagined what that difference could mean to someone like her. No one had thought that an extra few dollars an hour could mean a mother eating lunch instead of skipping it for her child. That night, he sat at his desk in the small hotel room he was staying in during the Undercover program. The lamp cast a warm glow over the notepad where he wrote down everything he had observed. He wrote about her smile, her kindness, her hard work. But he also wrote about her sacrifice, her skipped meals, and her quiet strength. He asked himself difficult questions. How many other employees in his company were facing the same struggle? How many were going hungry so their children could eat? How many were quietly working with smiles while carrying heavy burdens no one could see? The next morning, he returned to the store with a different kind of determination. He wasn't just there to sweep floors or bag groceries. He was there to listen. To watch. to learn. Throughout the day, he noticed more details. He saw the way she carefully counted her coins before buying a small bottle of water from the vending machine. He noticed how she wore the same shoes every day, shoes that looked worn but clean, polished as best as she could manage. He saw how her eyes softened whenever she spoke about her baby, even though she never spoke for long. It was clear to him now, she was doing everything she could, sacrificing in silence, and no one had noticed until now. Not her managers, not her co-workers, not the customers she served with a smile. She carried her struggle alone, hidden behind the uniform and the routine of everyday work. The Undercover CEO realized that this was the turning point of his journey. He had come to the store to understand his employees, but what he had discovered was deeper than he ever expected. This was not just about one cashier. This was about countless workers across his company, and maybe even across the world, who were making quiet sacrifices that went unseen. And for the first time in years, he felt a sense of urgency. Something had to change. He couldn't say it yet, not to her, not to the others. His secret was still safe. But inside, his heart had shifted. He had entered the store as a disguised boss wanting to learn about employees. Now, he was no longer just observing. He was carrying their stories inside him. And he knew that once the disguise came off, he would never see his role the same way again. As he left the store that night, the image of the cashier lingered once more in his mind, her gentle smile, her tired eyes, and her soft voice saying, "My baby comes first." Those words would stay with him forever. The days continued, and the Undercover CEO grew more connected to the life of the store. By now, he was no longer clumsy with the scanner or awkward with the grocery bags. The employees treated him like one of their own, joking with him, guiding him, and sometimes even asking for his help. He blended in so well that no one ever suspected who he truly was. But even as he learned the daily routines, his attention kept returning to the young cashier. Every time he saw her, he felt the same quiet ache in his heart. She smiled, she worked hard, and she made customers feel welcome, but behind that smile he now knew there was sacrifice. Each time she skipped her lunch to care for her baby, he was reminded of how much she was giving up. He wanted to help her right away. He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to go hungry anymore, that her child's future would be brighter, that she was seen and appreciated. But the rules of his undercover journey kept him silent. If he revealed himself too soon, the experience would end, and he might miss the chance to fully understand the struggles of his employees. So he kept watching. And as he did, he faced a new challenge, the weight of knowing and not being able to act. There was a moment one afternoon when the cashier's shift was particularly tough. The store was busier than usual, with long lines stretching down the aisles. Customers grew impatient, some tapping their feet, others sighing loudly. Through it all, she kept her voice calm and steady. She apologized kindly when a price didn't scan and thanked every person who came through her line. The Undercover CEO worked nearby, bagging groceries for her customers. He saw the sweat on her forehead, the slight tremble in her hands, the weariness in her movements. Yet she never complained. When the rush finally ended, she took a deep breath, gave him a small smile, and said, "Busy days like this are hard, but it's okay. At least I still have a job." Those words hit him hard. She wasn't just tired, she was grateful to even have the job that demanded so much of her. That was the kind of gratitude born from necessity, not choice. Later, during her short break, he saw her step outside again, formula in hand. He wanted to walk over and tell her that she deserved better, that her company could and should do more for her. But he stopped himself. He knew that if he spoke too soon, it would only sound like empty sympathy from a stranger. The real challenge for him was not lifting heavy boxes or standing for hours. The real challenge was keeping his true identity hidden while carrying the weight of everything he was learning. At night, back in his hotel room, He wrote pages of notes. He listed not only her struggles but also her strengths. She was kind, resilient, and professional, even when she was exhausted. He realized she wasn't just an employee. She was the perfect example of the kind of people who made his company what it was. She represented thousands of workers across the nation, people who worked with dignity, even when life tested them. He also began to think beyond her. If one young mother was skipping meals to feed her baby, how many others were doing the same? How many employees were making sacrifices that no one noticed? How many stories were hidden behind smiles and uniforms? The challenge was bigger than one person. It was about the entire system. It was about the wages, the schedules, the support that his company offered or failed to offer. And now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he could not ignore it anymore. But he also knew this: helping her alone was not enough. If he gave her a small raise or temporary support, it would be a kind gesture, but it would not solve the larger problem. Real change would require courage. It would require him to face his board of directors, to challenge old ways of thinking, and to fight for the people who worked on the front lines of his stores. This realization weighed heavily on him. For years, he had been praised for growing profits and expanding the company. But now, for the first time, he felt that the true test of his leadership was not in numbers, but in how he cared for the people who made those numbers possible. The undercover journey had begun as an experiment, but it was quickly turning into something deeper. It was transforming him. The next day, while he was helping stock shelves in the cereal aisle, the cashier walked by. She gave him a warm smile and asked, "How are you liking it here?" He laughed softly, pretending to be just another new worker. "It's harder than I expected," he admitted. "But I'm learning a lot." "You get used to it," she said, adjusting a box on the shelf. "It's not always easy, but you just keep going." Her words stayed with him. You just keep going. That was her life motto, it seemed. No matter how difficult things became, she kept moving forward for her baby, for her future, for the hope that things would one day get better. For the undercover CEO, this was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Inspiring, because her strength was remarkable. Heartbreaking, because she shouldn't have to struggle so hard just to survive. That evening, as he drove away from the store, he realized that he was reaching a breaking point. He couldn't remain silent much longer. His undercover mission was supposed to last a little longer, but the urge to reveal himself was growing stronger every day. Still, he reminded himself of the importance of patience. The right moment mattered. If he revealed himself too quickly, he might miss the opportunity to make a bigger impact. He wanted to not only help her personally but also use her story as a spark to create change across the company. So he waited. And as he waited, the challenge grew heavier. He walked into the store each day, blending in as the trainee, all the while carrying a secret that could change lives. He saw her skip lunch again and again. He saw her balancing motherhood and work with quiet dignity. He saw her give more than she received. And inside, he knew, the time to act was coming soon. The day of the big reveal finally arrived. The undercover CEO had carried the secret long enough. For days he had worked beside his employees, feeling their struggles and witnessing their hidden sacrifices. The weight of what he had seen pressed heavily on his heart. He knew it was time to take off the disguise, to let them see who he really was, and most importantly, to make a difference. The store manager had been called into a meeting earlier that morning. She seemed a little nervous, unaware of what was truly about to happen. The cashier, the young mother he had been quietly observing, was busy at her register as usual, smiling warmly at customers and scanning items with her steady hands. To her, this was just another day. She had no idea her life was about to change. When the CEO finally stepped forward, his heart pounded. He removed the apron and polo shirt, the outfit that had hidden his true identity for weeks. Standing before the small group of employees, he spoke in a calm but emotional voice. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "I haven't been completely honest. I'm not really a trainee. My name is," he paused, then revealed his full identity as the CEO of the company. Gasps filled the room. Employees looked at each other with wide eyes. Some covered their mouths in shock. The cashier, especially, stared at him in disbelief. Her kind eyes, which had always been steady and calm, now showed pure astonishment. She whispered softly, "You're the CEO?" He nodded gently. "Yes. I came here in disguise because I wanted to see what life was truly like for the people who make this company run. I wanted to see the reality behind the reports, behind the numbers. And what I've seen has touched me deeply." The room was silent as everyone waited for what he would say next. He turned toward the cashier, the young mother whose sacrifices had moved him more than words could describe. "I've been working by your side," he said softly, "and I've seen the way you work. You treat every customer with kindness. You stay strong even on the busiest days. But I also saw something else. I saw you giving up your own meals so that your baby could eat. That is one of the most powerful acts of love I have ever witnessed." Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down, embarrassed but also deeply touched. She had never expected anyone, let alone the CEO, to notice her quiet sacrifice. "I want you to know," he continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you don't have to carry this burden alone anymore. From today, I am making a personal commitment to help you. Your child care expenses will be covered. You will also receive financial assistance to make sure you and your child never go hungry again. And beyond that, I want to support your future. If you wish to continue your education, the company will provide a scholarship to help you reach your dreams." The cashier gasped quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she shook her head, overwhelmed. I I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," he said kindly. "You've already spoken through your actions. Your dedication and your strength have inspired me. And I want to make sure you and your child have the life you deserve." The other employees clapped softly, some wiping their own tears. They had worked beside her for months or even years, but they had never known the full extent of her struggle. Now, they saw her not just as a cashier, but as a mother, a fighter, and someone whose story had touched the very top of the company. But the CEO wasn't finished. He turned to the group, his voice growing stronger. "What I've seen here has changed me. And I promise you this, it won't stop with one person. The truth is, too many of our employees are struggling quietly. Too many are giving more than they receive. That is going to change. Starting today, we are raising wages across the company. We are also creating new programs to support working parents, programs that provide child care assistance, flexible schedules, and better opportunities for growth." The room filled with a different kind of energy now. Employees looked at each other with hope in their eyes. The news spread quickly through the store, and before long, people were whispering with excitement, unable to believe what they had just heard. The cashier, still emotional, stepped forward slowly. She looked at him with gratitude shining through her tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't know what this means to me, to my baby." He smiled gently. "Actually," he said, "I think I do now. And I will never forget it." In that moment, the CEO felt a transformation within himself. For years, he had measured success in profits, growth charts, and expansion plans. But now, he understood that the true measure of success was in people, their well-being, their happiness, their future. As the day went on, the atmosphere in the store felt different. Customers noticed the smiles on employees' faces, the sense of pride in their voices. Word spread through the company about the CEO's reveal, and soon, it became more than just a story about one cashier. It became a story about change, about compassion, and about leadership with heart. That evening, as the young mother walked to the parking lot with her baby in her arms, she paused and looked back at the store. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope. She felt seen. She felt like her sacrifices had not been in vain. The CEO, watching from a distance, knew this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges from the board, from budgets, from those who resisted change. But he no longer doubted his path. The story of one mother had given him the courage to lead differently. He thought about the moment he had first seen her skip her lunch. At the time, it had seemed like such a small act. But in truth, it was the spark that lit a fire inside him, a fire that would spread across the company and touch thousands of lives. As he drove away that night, he felt a peace he hadn't felt in years. He knew that leadership wasn't just about building a company. It was about building people. It was about lifting them up when they were tired, helping them when they struggled, and giving them hope when they felt unseen. And in the story of one young cashier and her baby, he had found not only inspiration, but also his purpose.